All right. We'll start at the beginning, and I won't save that. When you fire up Illustrator and use Illustrator, you can go down to your dock, and this is the icon we're looking for. It's orange. It says .ai, and we're using version 2015.3. It may take a little bit of time for it to launch, but once it does, your screen may look a little bit different from mine. You may have a welcome screen, you may not. Remember, we're sharing our computers with other people, so the preferences may have been changed for your computer that looks a little bit different. But for mine, I've set mine up to be very basic. The first thing to know is where to find everything and how to move things around. Over to your left, this is your tool palette or your toolbox. Most every tool that we're going to be using can be found in here. And if you hover your mouse over it, you can see I get a little, I can see the name of it. So here's the rotate tool, here's the pen tool. You've got two different kinds of selection tools. So if you ever need to find something, simply hover your mouse over it and you should be able to see it. Some of the tools have a little arrow at the very bottom right-hand corner. That means if you click and hold on them, it'll pop out and you can see some more related tools. So in this case, if I need a rectangle or an ellipse or a star, clicking and holding on these tools will allow me to select and use those tools. Also, notice that I can move it around by clicking at the top. If you ever see an arrow, you can also minimize it or maximize it. I tend to like to keep it in two-column format. Same is true over here on the right-hand side. These are what are called your palettes. Now the book will call them, let's see, whatever they call it. I think windows. I tend to call them palettes. The palettes are extra tools that usually work with the artwork you're working on. By default, they're down in little icons, but again, if I click the arrow, it'll pop out and I can see the name of it. And you can see several of them are kind of nested in with one another. So for instance, my swatches or my stroke values. Some of them, if they have a little up and down arrow, you can click and actually get more options with this. The main thing to remember about palettes are the name of them and what all goes with them. What I like to do is the most commonly used ones, I'll drag them off and make sure I can see them over here. So I use, for instance, the layers palette a lot. So I may drag that one off and have this one floating up, and I'll minimize everything else. If I did want to dock them back, it's simply a matter of dragging it back over here, and you'll see it turn blue and transparent, and I can dock that back into there. You'll be using palettes a lot in all of the software. Another thing to remember, if you can't find a palette, if you're searching over here and I need to find my actions palette, well, I don't really see it opened up. Every palette that you'll ever use, you can go up to Window, is listed right here. If it's got a check mark, that means it's open and active. So there's my color palette, it's got a check mark. Graphic styles is open as well. If it doesn't have a check mark, I can click on it. So here's my actions. And you can see it opens up my actions palette, and then I can move it over here as well. Some of the palettes that you'll first be starting off with would be like your stroke palettes. Let me see if I can refine that one. I don't see it quickly. Go to Window. There's stroke. You'll also be using your layers palette, and I can dock these two together and close those out. Swatches is another one that's commonly used. So I'm going to open those and leave those open. Also up here at the very top, these are your drop-down menus. If it's asking you for a command or if it's asking you to do a specific function for an object, oftentimes it'll be found under here. If you're not used to the Macintosh system, if you ever see anything that has an arrow to it, that usually means there's more options associated with that. So in this case, I can go to Type, Change Case, and then adjust the type with this one. Let's make a new document. If I go to File and New, other types of palettes that you'll work with, these are called dialog boxes, and these allow you to type in specific information. In this case, actually setting up a document that we need. The book is going to give you everything that you need to type in each one of these different categories and fields. Just be aware that sometimes they'll ask you to open up like Advanced and do extra things with it. I'm just going to keep this basic and say OK. And this will give me my blank document that I can start getting started working with. The final thing to pay attention to, whenever you choose a tool, the options up here will tend to change, and it depends on the tool that I'm working with. Right now I've got my selection tool, and these are the options that I have. I can actually click and select things. But if I choose my type tool, come on, give it time to initialize. Type tool is like the slowest tool ever to use. Come on, little beach ball. There we go. With type tool selected, you can see I get a little more options. I can change my character, I can change the size of it. And each one may have some different kind of styles depending on what you do with it. But just pay attention to what tool that you have, and then what options or what palettes are associated with it. Since we're talking about vectors, remember the vectors have to deal with coordinates and where you place things and what they look like. So if I was to draw, say, a rectangle, I've chosen the tool. Oftentimes all you have to do is click and drag, and it's kind of intuitive. You get an idea of how it would look, and when I let go, my rectangle has been created. Notice when I did this, you see some little lines start to appear. For instance, there's a pink line, or when I click and drag, you can see a horizontal line appears. These are extra smart guides that help you quickly create perfect shapes or perfect objects. In this case, if I needed a perfect square, that smart guide is allowing me to lock that into a specific size or height and width. When I let go, I know I've got a perfect square versus if I just click and drag and get that. If I need to ever select or move things around, this is where these two selection tools come in handy. The black arrow allows me to click on an object and move it around. Also, pay attention to the corners and edges. The little black squares on the corners allow me to click on the edges and resize whatever I have. That's called your bounding box. So if I needed to change the size of it, that's the way of doing it. If I move my cursor on the outside, notice how I've got a little rounded arrow. This will allow me to click and drag, and I can actually change the rotation of it. Now keep in mind, what am I actually changing? What did I draw up on the board? I'm changing the points of it. The computer is actually doing all the drawing of the line itself. If I wanted to change individual points, let's say I only wanted to change this one point, this is where the white arrow, the direct selection tool, comes in. With this one, I can hover over this one point. Watch my cursor change. See how it kind of lights up? It says anchor. When I click on it, that one point is selected and I can drag it around. And the other points will not move whatsoever. So here's that point, here's this point, and the others. And wherever I move them, of course, it will change it up accordingly. And this is true for any object that you create. If I do an ellipse, click and drag. If I want a perfect circle, there's that. Of course, if I use my regular selection tool, I've got a bounding box that lets me change the height and width of it, also the position of it. Or I can use my direct selection tool to change the anchor points that I'm working with as well. Now, if I've got a curved object, I've got some extra little handles that go along with this. Hey, did anybody take my quiz? Did anybody get this as a question? What's the name of these handles? Take the bonus day quiz. You may get this as a question. There's a name for these handles. And if you figure it out, you get an extra point. It's on the quiz that I have. But those handles allow me to change the curvature of each of the lines as well. Again, I'm using my white arrow direct selection tool to be able to move and do this. Let's delete these away. If you need to get rid of something, simply select it, hit the delete key on your keyboard. It's as good as gone. Other things that you can change about objects that you create are their color. And there's a couple of different places that you can look in. I've got my object selected, in this case right here. The first place I can look is at the very top left-hand corner. I have a fill color, and these are some pre-made swatches, and I have a stroke color. Stroke is another word for the outline of an object. So if I wanted to change my fill color to, say, this red, simply select it, choose red, and it's a matter of changing that. If I want to change my stroke color to Blue, there it is. I know it's hard to see because it's really, really thin. I can also change, hey, here's the size of my stroke. I can click on the up arrow. You can see the size of it increasing, or I can choose from some predefined styles from it as well. Other places that you can change the fill in the stroke, notice at the very bottom of my toolbox, this is my fill color. When I click on it, it comes forward. If I double click, I get a specific color picker. So no longer do I have the swatches, but I can get the exact color that I need. Sometimes you can type in the exact CMYK value or the RGB value and get that perfect shade of red that you want. Same is true for if I double click on the stroke color. Say OK to that. At any time, if you need to get rid of a color, if you need it to be either transparent or null is what it's called, I've brought my stroke to the front. This option allows me to choose none for the color. And you can see there's no stroke value to it whatsoever, no outline that goes through it. The reason I show you that is because you're going to need to be able to change colors, and there's a couple of places you can look. Up here at the top or at the bottom of your toolbox is the next area. The final thing are these little dots that are turned on from here. These are my corner rounding things. I forgot what the exact name of it. If you don't see them, you can go to View, and here's all the different things we can turn on. First of all, there's my smart guides. Remember, your smart guides help you actually give the correct height and width of things. Other guides, there it is, the corner widget is what it's called. With corner widget, I can click on a corner and very quickly round off. You can see all the corners are selected with just a drag. Hey, if I selected just my direct selection tool and I click on this corner, I can change just that one corner. You can see how the others are not selected. See my anchor points that I have? Those are the points that are creating. The computer is doing all the work as far as filling in the color and making the shape that I have. So some of the first things that you're going to be doing are you're going to use your rectangle tool. And I'm not going to do a good job. I'm not following along in the book. I'm just going to do mine in, let's do mine in blue. Say okay. You'll make a rectangle. Excuse me, make a square. You're going to round off that rectangle just a little bit. Here's another great one to remember as far as making copies of different objects. One thing you can do is going up to Edit, and here's Copy. Also notice there's Paste and Cut and a lot of things that you're normally used to. What's the keyboard shortcut for copy?
Control-C.
Command-C or Control-C. On a Macintosh, you're using the Command key. Y'all find the Command key. It's right next to the space bar. So if I needed to copy something, I would hit Command-C. Paste is Command-V, Command-X for cut. If you're used to working on a Windows, it's the same keyboard shortcuts. Except instead of hitting Control, instead of hitting Control on a Mac, you're hitting Command. The book gives you the instructions for keyboard shortcuts in both Windows and Mac. So be careful which ones that you're looking at for those. So if I copy it and paste it, there's my copy that I have from here. Again, use your selection tool to move it around. I'm going to show you a quick way of making copies. I've got my selection tool. I can select my object. Find the Option key on your keyboard. It's right next to Command. If I hold down Option, notice how my cursor changes. I've got a double arrow, white and black. When I click and drag with Option, it automatically makes a very quick copy of it. And so this is a way I can quickly make copies of different things simply by selecting them, holding down Option, and dragging to make those. What you're going to be doing for these icons is you're going to be setting up a whole matrix, a grid of 8 different icons, and you're going to place your icon in front of them. 8 different squares, place your icon in front of them. You can see how very quickly I was able to make those. If I wanted them to be equally spaced out, this is where my transform, my guides can come in. You can see I can move it over and I get kind of a distance. It's helping me line it up. If I was to copy it again, you can see it's snapped to that particular point. Boom. And so the distance is exactly equal. Watch it come up as I do it again. See the little equal signs in between both of them? Very simply, it allows me to create some quick and easy copies of it that are perfectly placed on here. Another palette that they use is your transform palette. I don't see it open, so I'm going to go to Window, down to Transform. Transform will tell you things like your X and Y coordinate. Let me select one. You can see now it lights up and I get information. There's the X, the Y, there's the width of it, the W, and the H is for the height of it. So if I needed to type in a specific location or a specific height of it, let's say I wanted this to be exactly 2 inches. So I can type in 2 for the width, and I can type in 2 for the height. And you can see it automatically updates to that size. Let me show you a quicker way of doing it. I'm going to select this one. This little icon out here, if I click on it, will link together both of these. Now, if I make a change to the width, and I click on the height, automatically links them together. It keeps them proportional. Pay attention to if something has links or not. What it's doing is it's keeping things exactly the same or proportional with both of those. The final thing, and this is what trips up a lot of people, is the X and Y coordinates for an object that you have. I've got different points for every object. There's an upper right, there's a middle, upper left, middle, right. There's middle, left, middle, right, and bottom, left, middle, right. Y'all tracking with me? Does that make sense? Whenever I give the X and Y coordinates, I need to pay attention to its relative position. So for instance, let's say I wanted this to be right here at the corner, right here. Right now, I've got that top left-hand corner selected. So if I was to choose my X and Y coordinates to be 0, 0, you can see it moves it to the 0, 0 coordinate here. But watch what happens if I was to say choose my middle reference point. Notice that it's changed up a little bit. If I set that to 0, 0, what's the difference? The middle point is now at 0, 0. So wherever your reference point is may determine the position on the page based on the position or the size of your object itself. You thought graphic designers don't have to do a lot of math. I'm telling you, you got to know that math. But it's really, it comes easy and intuitive once you start doing a lot more. The final thing are some of the other little transformations you can do to it. For instance, if I needed to skew it, or if I needed to change the angle of it, I can type in a specific angle. So let's say I needed this to be rotated exactly 90 degrees. I can either choose 90 degrees. Whoop, that was a flip. Oh, your reference point, by the way. Let's do it in the middle. Rotation of 90 degrees. Hit return. Ah, it didn't move. Why? Oh, a 90-degree rotation of a square is still a square. What should it be? What am I looking for? 45-degree angle. There we go. Ah, okay. So I've rotated it 45 degrees based on its 0 point. But if I did the upper left-hand corner and did another 90 degree, you can see it'll flip it that way. Same way for skewing it or shearing it. I can actually move things around, make some really funky looking shapes very, very quickly. That's not what we want. Let's do this first one. Drag it out. I'm going to place on one of my icons. By the way, I'm hitting the F3 icon, and that shows me the whole desktop in my screen, so I can click on this one. I think the first one is the picnic. There it is. If you ever want to get a preview of what something looks like, select the file and hit the space bar, and it'll pop up and it'll give you a little preview of what it looks like. That's a handy feature for working on a Mac. To place something in here, you can go to File, down to, where is it? Where is Place? Give it just a second. Now I need to know where these are saved to. Remember, when you download something, where should you be placing stuff to? In your folder, a folder with your name on it. By the way, I'll show you how to make a folder before we end this. But I know I've got mine on my jump drive. So there's my camping stages. By the way, here's on the side, here's some quick links. The desktop or your jump drive is over there. Camping stages, and there's my picnic file. I'm going to place this, and in my case, I'm going to keep it as a template. You'll see what that means. Hit place. There it is right here. I can't move it around. Here's what happens when you place something as a template. Check out my layers palette. Here's another important one to have up. Right now, layer 1 is whatever is on this blue layer. So if I was to start creating other things, you see how the icon is updating? Everything is on the same layer. Where's my picnic template? It's underneath it, it's below it. And you can see when I put something on top of it, it's going to be able to cover it up. So what I need to do is, whoops, hit cancel. What I need to do, I'm going to erase these away, is to put this layer on top of layer 1. I can do this by clicking on a layer and dragging. You can see my little hand pops up. And I'm going to drag it till it's right above here. And if you can't see it, but there's a little line. And I let go, you can see now they're swapped up. You're going to be placing 8 different layers on here, all the different icons. So you need to be able to move those layers around. Now if I was to move this, you can see it's underneath it. I still can't select my little icon. The final thing to know about layers are if they're locked or unlocked. If they're locked, you see the little lock icon, that means nothing on that layer can be selected. If I check it off, now I can click on it and actually move it around and drag it. If I was to lock it again, now no changes can be made and it's actually automatically selecting my layer underneath for this one. If I need to zoom in, there is a tool, a little zoom tool right here. Looks like a magnifying glass, and of course you can click on it and it'll zoom in. Oftentimes I use the keyboard shortcut Command and plus sign and minus sign. Y'all find the plus and minus next to your delete key. Command plus and minus will let you zoom in and out very quickly. So now I'm set up right here. Let's go back to this one. If you do need to make a new layer, in my case I'm going to work on top of this layer. We'll click New Layer. At the very bottom there's a couple of different options. The first one will allow you to delete a layer. The second one lets you make a new blank layer. What layer am I working on? Layer 3. If it's highlighted, that's what I'm working in. And so now every time I create something new from here, let's make some green squares. Click and drag. You can see in layer 3, that's where my green stuff is showing up. If I was to create this really quickly, again, I'm not following the instructions in the book. It's simply a matter of clicking and dragging. There's one. Here's the other. Now the book is going to tell you how to type in specific coordinates and make copies of and do shearing and doing a bunch of transformations. Follow the instructions in the book. But, hey, if I want to make a copy of this, what can I hold down?
Control-C.
Not Control-C. Well, Control-C will make a copy of it. That's actually correct. What if Option, bingo. Hold down the Option key, drag over, and I can make a quick copy of this. And of course, use my arrow keys to nudge that. Hey, this is also a rectangle, but it's skewed a little bit. Click and drag. Again, if I don't have it in the right spot, use your selection tool to make it move. Here's my transform. And with this, I can actually, we'll use my up arrow, and you can see it increment just a little bit. What I've done is I'm hitting my up arrow, and I'm getting it to increment in 1%. And I can move that till it's right on top of it.
And
I
was just curious, could you have also accomplished that by using the single select tool and just moving the points?
You sure can. Very good. So let's try that. Here's what he's talking about. If I made one right here, I'm on the wrong layer. Make sure you're on layer 3. If I made another drawing like this, we'll make it green. I can use my direct selection tool. I'll zoom in and click on just this line or both of the points, and I can drag it over this way. You can see only those 2 lines are also moving as well. And then I can use my arrows to nudge it in. I'm using my arrows on my arrow key to be able to do that. Click on here and make it look perfect. Of course, your guys are going to make it where the colors are the same, everything is consistent. Hey, this time let's delete away my template picture. Selected my template layer, my delete icon. We'll get rid of it. It's asking, are you sure you want to do this? We'll say OK. And now I'm left with my icon. What's wrong with the colors?
One is off.
One's off. I'm going to select all of them by clicking and dragging over it. Notice I've got my black arrow. When I click and drag over multiple things, they all get selected. What I don't want to select is my blue area. So I want to deselect something. Here's how to deselect if you've got too many things selected. Find the Shift key. I'm using the Shift key that's on the far left-hand side. This way everything is all nice and close to each other. If you hold down Shift and select something, it'll deselect it. Check out where my bounding box is now. If I was to hold down Shift and select another object, it'll actually add on to my selection. So that's one way of quickly deselecting objects and selecting multiple things. But let's change the color of it. Hey, what's my color for my fill? It gives me a question mark. Why is it a question mark? Got multiple different colors selected. I got a darker green and a lighter. If I was to choose a color now, it'll actually change up all of them. So let's do gold. Now when I deselect, you can see they're exactly the way it should be. Pretty cool? This is the basics of working with the different shapes that you have and also the different selection tools and the palettes. When you follow along in the book, this is what it's going to look ask for. The second one that they go through is the little hiker guy. Where's hiker? This guy is made using just lines. And in this case, they're going to ask you to make some lines. I'll make some thick lines. We'll need to keep it black. I could use my stroke palette to make them a lot thicker. Again, I'm increasing that. I can change the roundedness of it by changing up a cap. So there's that. And again, I can use my direct selection tool to select only one point and copy those and create those as well. So as you're working through here, you can see exactly the way it should look when you draw each of the little lines that they have. When it gets to the tints, this is another really cool one. I got to play around with this new tool. It came out with this newer version. There is a new tool, where is it? I believe it's this one, called the Shaper tool, that allows you to, instead of using your shapes, you can roughly draw them off. So let's see if this will work. I'll draw off a triangle, and it automatically draws a triangle for me. If I do just a rough circle, automatically draws a perfect circle for me. Really, really cool. Very, very fast way of drawing perfect shapes, especially if you can't draw really, really well. And if I needed to draw something else on top of that, and there's ways you can erase away from it. I think if you hold down, I'm going to select both of them. Okay, I got to go through this and actually practice on those. But for this, you can very quickly draw shapes and create the exact shape that you want. In this case, hey, I drew an oval. Other shapes that let you build them together, these are the ones I'm used to using. If you got two shapes that are overlapping one another, there are tools like your eraser tool or your shape builder tool that allow you to take away certain areas. So anything that's overlapping, I was able to quickly cut that out and use that to make the shape that I want. Again, I can resize it and then draw off the extra little bits. It's a lot of fun to play around with. The main thing to pay attention to is what layer you're on, what tool you have, and also what palette kind of goes along with the tool that you're working with. Pretty cool. Got about 45 minutes left in class, so I'm going to turn your computer back over to you. Before I do, real quick, let me show you how to make a folder, for those of you who don't know how to make a folder. I'm on my desktop. Find the Control key. It's at the very bottom left-hand corner of your keyboard. When you hold down Control and click, you'll get a pop-up. One of the options is to make a new folder. There it is there. You can type in your name. And when you download everything and save your files, save it to that folder with your name on it. Also, you can drag it to your your jump drive. Everybody should have a jump drive that you back up all of your work to. That's the only way I can ensure that you've got extra copies, so if your computer blows up and you lose everything, hey, you've got it saved somewhere else. But use your jump drive to do that. First thing you should do, if you haven't already, make a folder with your name on it. All right, now I'm going to turn it back over to y'all. Let y'all have fun with this.